Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is David Gaz, a creative director, filmmaker, photographer, and the founder of the Bureau of Small Projects, a branding agency based in Los Angeles, California. Everyone at the Bureau of Small Projects has worked with Fortune 500 companies, and they bring their knowledge to help small businesses, startups, and nonprofits. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was awesome.
So I'm excited to have you on because, man, you work with the kinds of people I like to hang out with, the entrepreneurs doing early stage stuff. So I'm sure you've got a lot of stories about this. But before we get into all of that, give us a couple of minutes about your background and what got you to where you are today.
Oh, I would love to. The thing I love most about my job is exactly what you said. It's working with entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 16 years old. My first business was an ice cream truck. And I've only had maybe 1 or 2 jobs in my whole life, actual jobs. And what brought me here was I used to be a partner in a firm that worked exclusively with Fortune 500 brands and big brands and Fortune 500 companies. And a few years back, we were politically in a time, I think, kind of like today, where everybody was treating each other really poorly. And I'm starting to think it's always been like that, actually. But I was reading this article in Scientific American by these 2 guys, James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis at Harvard University, who had scientifically proven that kindness is contagious. That if I do something nice for you, you'll do something statistically, scientifically proven for 4 other people. Each of those 4 people, statistically, scientifically proven, will do something nice for 4 more people, and so on and so on. Now, being in marketing and branding, we love anything viral like that. And then I thought that given the resources that I had at my disposal, that if I were to produce a film about that, maybe I could change things and make people around me be a little bit nicer. And so I produced a film, Kindness is Contagious, a film all about being nice, but more importantly, the benefits of being nice. And being an entrepreneur my whole life, we learned that this whole nice guys finish last thing is totally bogus. That nice guys actually, and this part freaked me out, they actually statistically make more money than not nice people. There's a few outliers that make a ton of money.
Right.
If you collectively put it all together, nice people make way more money than not nice people. And then on top of that, of course, they have more friends. They have better jobs because who hires jerks, right?
Right.
Better family life makes sense. But the other thing that blew me away is they actually live longer. Nice people physically live longer than not nice people. So being an entrepreneur, my next question was, I wonder if there's anybody putting these practices to business. And so as part of the film, we interviewed Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, startups, healthcare organizations, nonprofits, people whose day job was making the world a better place. And I started to get jealous because my day job was sucking every last penny out of people's pockets. And I thought, what could I do? And this is the creation of the Bureau, is what could I do to make my day job like them, making the world a better place? And so what I came up with was, what if I teach these people making the world a better place how to suck every last penny out of people's pockets, but put it to use for the betterment of mankind? And that was the foundation of the Bureau of Small Projects. And who knew everybody liked to learn how to suck every last penny out of people's pockets. But I started it as kind of an incubator within my old company. And after about a year, my business partner came up to me and said, "Hey, David, why don't you start working with our real clients?" And he did the air quotes thing and everything. And I was like, well, maybe you haven't looked at our balance sheet, but it seems like we're now financing your real clients. And so if you've ever been in a partnership and hearing your history about entrepreneurship, you probably had a bunch of them. We got in one of those founders fights that partners inevitably always get into. And then I decided what we agreed to was he kept the old business. I took the Bureau of Small Projects, and this was about 10 years ago. And we spun it off into its own company, and it's been just going like gangbusters ever since.
Yeah.
We just made the Inc. 5,000 list of fastest growing companies in America.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
So for people that are listening to the podcast, you're missing out on the video because behind David's right shoulder is a movie poster, I think, for the movie that you were just talking about, right? Yep. Kindness is Contagious, with a big yellow smiley face. You know, that smiley face, by the way, always reminds me of the movie Forrest Gump, where he wipes his face and then the guy gets the idea of creating the yellow smiley face sticker that goes viral. So before we get into kind of the stuff about the Bureau of Small Projects, I want to ask you about the ice cream truck that you did at the age of 16. So what happened? Like, how did you get into an ice cream truck business at that age? And how did your parents allow you to get into an ice cream truck business at that age?
Well, it was actually my father. I've never been terribly employable. That's another reason why I've been an entrepreneur.
I think that defines all of us as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing entrepreneurs have in common. They can't hold down a job. And so my father was just kind of touching. He went through a brief period where he got the entrepreneurial bug. With me, it stuck. And so at the time, I think it was more his dream at first than mine. And he thought it would be a great idea to do an ice cream truck for a summer job. And so, and I think it was the best way to learn entrepreneurship. So my brother and I ran the ice cream truck. And I learned so many lessons. I think the basic one for entrepreneurship is I learned that all you do is you buy ice cream for half the price, you double it, you sell it, you take part of the money, keep it for yourself, part of it to buy more ice cream, sell it, double it, sell it, double it. And, people do business plans when they start businesses and they worry about regulations and all that, which is important. But starting a business, it's just as simple as that. You sell something, you mark it up, you use the profit to buy more of what you're selling and just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, it's the classic candy bar arbitrage that we talk about so often on this show. That I talk about because I did that as a kid where I would go to the convenience store, buy candy bars, and then take them to school and sell them to other kids during lunchtime at a markup. And then I'd use that delta there, of course, to buy more candy bars, but also to go fund my habit, which was buying comic books. And so that was kind of the source of funding for my comic book habits back in those days.
And it's really that simple, right?
Yeah.
Everything else are stuff you have to do, taxes, payroll,
right,
all of that stuff. But the foundation of entrepreneurship is literally that simple.
Yeah. Always make sure you're selling it for more than it costs to get.
Yep.
If you follow that axiom, you should be good. There's other things along the way, but basically you should be good.
Well, step two is my brother embezzled half of the money halfway through the summer. And so I had to deal with earning it all back, embezzlement, and all of and catastrophe. So it was a hell of an educational experience.
Man, embezzlement at a teenager's age, man.
Yeah.
Should have reported him to the IRS because if you didn't put that on his taxes, then you get in trouble. You can go to jail for embezzlement and not paying taxes on it.
Every business has catastrophes, right? Good to learn it right on the first try.
I love it. Okay, so in launching this, so you essentially had, it sounds like a founder breakup that helped you kind of spin this off as its own thing, or founder friction. Yeah. Maybe not a breakup, but founder friction.
Total breakup. It was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah. So in doing that, was there anything that made you nervous about going in on your own, or was it so well established at that point that you were good?
No, it was really challenging. I think anybody who owns a business, no matter how successful, should always have like a little bit of nervousness in there, right? It keeps you on edge.
Yeah.
Um, we had a non-compete thing in place, so I had to kind of navigate around the non-compete. And so I brought a handful of clients with me, but the difficult thing was I had to very quickly get a whole bunch of new clients for us.
Right. So you weren't able to solicit the clients that you had before for some period of time, I imagine.
No, we had a non-compete. So, and I think that's fairly unethical as well. I wanted to clean,
Of course, yeah. So how did you go through that process then of finding all these new clients?
Well, from a branding perspective, it's really interesting because we deal with small business startups and nonprofits. And they always come to us when they come to us for branding. They really mean a logo, fonts, colors, design things.
Right.
And one of the key things that we bring from our experience with big businesses and Fortune 500 companies is that has very little to do with it. Brand is all about strategy. Mm-hmm. And so going into this, and to be honest, I screw everything up the first try anyway. So to go into it, I did what everybody does. I put a portfolio on our website, showed all the beautiful things we did, and came up with a clever phrase called "small is the new big." And I thought, oh, this is really clever. No strategy, no meaning to it, anything. And nobody. No, I thought our website was broken because nobody was clicking on anything. And then when you get that nervousness, when your back's up against the wall, I was like, good God, what am I going to do? And then I kind of always have been about practicing what I preach. And so I went to strategy, and the way that we approach branding that I think semi-unique, I think it's part of this evolving ecosystem with, winner take all economies and the way the world's changed since the internet, since COVID, since all of this. But my philosophy on branding that I think is really powerful is a brand is your value proposition. It's not so much your story. It's what do you do differently and better than your competitors. It's the reason for people to do business with you.
Right.
So going to practice what we preach, that's where we came up. And I don't want to take credit myself. I've got a co-founder, Michael Newman. I've got a Conan, who's our COO. We kind of all huddled and was like, God, what are we going to do, with this mess? And so that's where we decided to focus on, small, Fortune 500 big brand experience, put the work for small business startups and nonprofits.
Yeah.
And the second we put that into place, everything exploded.
Yeah. So why, in doing this move, why is that the focus? Why do you like working with small businesses, startups, side hustlers, entrepreneurs? Like, why?
Well, two reasons. I'd say the real reason why is I love entrepreneurs. I love everything about it. I've been one my whole life. I love, when with my old company, like Mercedes was a client of ours, and Mr. Mercedes has been long gone forever, and we got stuck with these frustrated MBAs that are, very well credentialed, but everybody kind of learned the rules and everything like that. And when we work with the Bureau of Small Projects, I'm working with people like me with my ice cream truck, that they're breaking the rules, they're figuring it out as they go. We work with a lot of Silicon Valley startups, so they're like inventing the future. It is so cool. So that's the number one reason.
Okay.
And the number two reason that I kind of discovered by accident was our field is like wide open at this level, right? Because when people get really good at what they do, they immediately go for the Fortune 500 and big brands because they want the money. And not a lot of people go the other way. And when I got in touch with my young entrepreneurial spirit, it was wonderful. But then I realized that these companies don't have access to this level of work because, once people get good, they go straight for the big brands. And it just made the whole field wide open. And I've never been in a field where I felt that it was less competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's an interesting insight that you have there, because I think we see that a lot of times in businesses, in almost any market that they're in. They'll start and they always want to go bigger and bigger, right? You see this with like the example that pops to mind for me is venture capital. venture capital funds, they'll always start with this small, like 10 or $20 million first fund. Then the second fund is like 50 or $75 million. And then the third fund is $300 million. And the kinds of investments that you can do are very different when you have a $300 million fund versus a $10 million fund because of how quickly you have to deploy that capital. And it has caused an ongoing shift and this kind of like lack of capital on that early stage to almost exactly your point, because everybody keeps moving upward to work on those enterprise customers and those large customers, that there's nobody really servicing those small early stage. So that's a fascinating insight, and I very much appreciate that. Okay, so you launch into this thing. Is this the first time that you're running a company on your own, or I mean, the ice cream truck is a company, but it's, more of a project, really. Is this the first time that it's a real company?
That's an excellent question, because after the ice cream truck, I went to college. I'd say my next venture was, I moved to Paris. I was a creative director at an agency that worked with like the Louvre, the Musée d'Art Moderne, all these really cool museum clients. But I was in Paris. I was like in my early 20s. I had the opportunity to be a fashion photographer. And so then I was on my own, and it was very exciting, fun, and very scary. And since then, I think many of the times I always look to a partner to kind of diffuse the risk or the fear a little bit. And so I went through a period where it was with partners, never ended well. They were wonderful people, but the partnerships never really ended well. And maybe it's because I didn't get the right partner, like the last one. And I think a lot of it was either that they went crazy because I'm kind of crazy and I was a fashion photographer and they want to be doing that rather than doing the numbers stuff, whatever. But yeah, it's like I went through that period and now I'm rediscovering the joy of being the founder. That, I've got partners that work with me, but I'm the decision maker in the company. And I kind of highly recommend having one decision maker rather than that two partner situation.
Right. Okay. So then in launching into this, being a founder, the work can take up all your time, basically, as much time as you're willing to give it. Right.
Absolutely.
How do you balance that for yourself? And how do you balance the stress of running a business? Being the sole decision maker, that's a lot of stress. How do you balance all of that for yourself?
Yeah, I think you need to embrace the stress. My wife always, family is very important to me. And I think that, that finding the right, life partner is a big part of that. That somebody that just can live with your personality and the weirdness that comes around being an entrepreneur. And then honestly, I've been through this. You and I were chatting before the show about the movie business, which was the most stress that I've ever had to deal with in my life.
Right.
It was like take medication to deal with the stress. And, I in that environment of making movies, I've had a crazy career. But I also went to therapists, as most people in the movie business do. And my last therapist ever, which is a testament to how good he was, I had millions in the bank. I was feeling pretty successful, but I still felt like one step away from being a homeless person. And yeah. I think entrepreneurs in general feel a little bit of that pressure. One deal goes bad and I'm out on the street or something.
Right.
And this therapist gave me this stress nugget that was, I think, the best thing that I've ever heard in my whole life. He just asked out, frankly, do you think you ever really will be a homeless person? And I said, I'll probably figure it out. I'm a hustler. And then he said, what you do is you catastrophize things. And that was the nugget that really helped me overcome stress. Because now when I'm in a really difficult situation, I remember what he said and I go, I'm probably catastrophizing things. I can figure it out. And I've been through all these crazy careers, these crazy businesses in my whole career, and I've made it this far. So there's no reason why it's all going to fall apart now. And so I just go back to that thing and you just kind of live with the immediate stress, but then knowing that, it's going to probably always work out because it always has.
Right.
Get you through it.
Yeah. Okay. Since you, David, since you touched on the movie business, we were talking, like you said, before we started recording. Um, let's talk about that worst experience that you had in the movie business and tell me a little bit about what happened there and how you dealt with it.
Oh, the losing $1 million of my own money part?
That would be it.
Yeah. I did one of the dumbest things ever. At the time, I was a very successful photographer. And it was right around when photography was going through the change from film to digital. And it's very much like what people are dealing with AI right now, where the whole industry is changing. And I'm convinced that AI is going to change everything profoundly, as did computers and digital change photography. And I had literally the best job ever. I was 25 years old, fashion photographer in Paris. Single, working with top models. It was just like making $10,000 a day at 25 years old. It was like literally like I lucked into the dream job. And then digital took over and everybody, not just me. I mean, it was, everybody, it just changed everything and pulled the rug out from under me. And, once you get used to $10,000 a day, your spending habits, your lifestyle, it kind of revolves around that. And I was like, holy crap, what do I do now? And I made the dumbest thing ever, but it's part of the beauty of life, is I said, making movies can't be that much harder than doing a photo shoot. Right? It's a big photo shoots, like Levi's is a client of mine, and we do $250,000 a day photo shoots with the models, the studios, all of the stuff, the team around it. And I thought, this is pretty much the same thing as making a movie. How hard could it be? Yeah, turns out very hard.
Famous last words. How hard could it be?
Yeah. And so I had agents, I had a whole system in place. And so the agents kind of helped me put together the deal, got investors. And now investors, when you're looking for investors, it sounds like the dream. But as I'm sure you've had investors before. It is a nightmare. All they do is hound you all the time. And so my agents put together investors to show the commitment. I put up $1 million of my own money. And turns out I'm terrible at making movies.
So it sounds like the only worse option you could have made for yourself is instead saying, how hard is it to start an airline? It's fine. I'll do that. Right. Yeah. Like that's the saying about how to make $1 million in an airline is to start with $100 million. And that's how you make $1 million in an airline.
And that's what I love about entrepreneurs, right? I'm by no means alone in this,
Right.
Losing $1 million, I'm like by far the only person that's ever lost $1 million on an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah.
And then, once you've done it and you've gone through catastrophes like that and succeeded, life gets a little easier because, you still kind of figure it out, and if you lose $1 million and you're still okay.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, everything becomes this like, well, at least it's not as bad as that other time, because you're always referencing back to that other time where it was so much worse.
Well, and I think you realize too, life isn't about money at all. It's about the experiences. And I'll tell you, the whole experience going through that, learning, the excitement, the ups and downs, the craziness, it was kind of worth $1 million,
Yeah. Yeah. It's good that you can appreciate the price of admission for that experience there now, this many years later. Okay. Let's talk about, we touched upon this a little bit. Let's talk about boundaries for yourself. And how do you think about boundaries between work and life and how do you set them? And do you have a schedule each day of things that you're absolutely like, I must do every day. This is how I start my day or how I end my day.
I love that question too, because I came after just doing what I do for my whole life. I realized that I'm not a goal person or a boundary person, right? I'm a path person. And it's a lovely way to live your life rather than set goals and focused on things. You just kind of go down a path. Now you do have boundaries, like you have meetings to go to, and you don't want to be late for meetings. That's disrespectful to other people.
Right.
You got family to take care of, you've got certain built-in boundaries, but I try to avoid anything that puts in goals or boundaries in my life, because it's interesting because my next documentary that I'm working on is going to be about luck. And there's this guy, Richard Wiseman, who I haven't talked to yet. If he's listening, please let me use you in the movie. But Richard Wiseman did one of the coolest scientific experiments I've ever heard of in my whole life. He took 200 profoundly unlucky people and 200 profoundly lucky people, and he said, I'm going to try to figure out what this luck thing is.
Okay.
And his conclusion at the end of this was it has nothing to do with anything supernatural. It's nothing magical. It's behavior.
Right.
And that the lucky people had a very different type of behavior than the unlucky people. And one of those behaviors that leads me down to this path thing was that lucky people are always looking for opportunity, whereas unlucky people, they kind of just do the task at hand.
Right.
One example he said is when there was this, he had all these really cool scientific experiments. I'm a science geek. And one of them that you might have heard of, but maybe not known it was part of this particular this study, is he had all these people, the unlucky people and the lucky people, go into a room, and he gave them all a newspaper. And he said, I want you to count all of the photos in the newspaper. You've got 5 minutes to do it, and whoever succeeds and gives me the correct number gets $20. And so all these people went into the room, and by and large, all of the unlucky people, or pretty much every one of them, didn't make it. I mean, there was a lot of pictures in the newspaper, and the lucky people tended to go up after like a minute and drop off the newspaper and say there's 427 pictures in this newspaper.
Right. And
what was interesting about the experiment is the headline on the newspaper said there are 427 pictures in this newspaper. The unlucky people focused on the task at hand and the goal, and they went in and they looked at all of the little pictures and started counting, and they just went 1, 2, 3 and did what they were told to do.
Right.
The lucky people kind of took it more relaxed, kicked back, read the newspaper and go, oh, look at that, right? And then dropped it off, took their $20 and left.
Right.
Another similar experiment that they did that kind of highlights the behavior is they told the lucky people and the unlucky people one at a time. They said, hey, there's a gentleman in this cafe that you need to talk to. It'll just take 5 minutes. Go in and speak to him. It's very important for the study. So the unlucky people took a beeline to the guy in the cafe, talked to him, did what they do. The lucky people kind of just casually strolled in and noticed there was a $100 bill on the ground in the door before the cafe. So the lucky people were the people that tended to look around at all the things around them and kind of meandered towards their goal, but the unlucky people just beeline to it. And to me, that's the path versus goal. I think if you go to a goal, like one of the things we know as entrepreneurs is businesses almost never do what they set out to do in the first place. In Silicon Valley, they call it the pivot. All of our successful clients, and we work with a lot of small businesses and startups, all of them, what they do is they just kind of don't give up, right? They change their plans. They change their mind all the time. Jeff Bezos has a saying that he said one of the things that really people who are right a lot was his words. What they all have in common is they change their mind. And I think that's the way, like when you're on a path, you kind of give yourself the option to change your mind. You can go to the left, you can go to the right. You do that lateral thinking that creative people are so good at, But if you have a goal, you tend to go straight for the goal and not see anything around you.
Yeah, it's that random walk that startups often have, right? So you're just kind of meandering until you actually get to the goal and figure out what it is that you were doing in the first place.
Yeah, and it seems like the really successful ones, it's kind of like that, right? A lot of time, it's never what they started out to do, or they branch off into other things that are phenomenally successful,
Yeah.
Apple started selling computers, and they made all their money on phones and apps.
Right. I mean, the classic example of that was back in the day, it was Twitter. And I've now forgotten what it was called originally, but they were working on some other product and it was a disaster. It failed and they offered to give all the money back to their investors, or they could roll it over into this new thing that they figured out that they wanted to work on. Most of them just asked for their money back and moved on with life. Some went on in with that team and into what became Twitter. And clearly that was in the end the right choice. But okay, so you've had a long career now. And thinking about kind of all the things that have happened, if you could go back in time and do something differently, other than making sure your brother didn't embezzle from the ice cream truck, what would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. And I think I've got the answer to that I carry with me every day, because I've often thought with the movie, right? I thought, gosh, because when I, I wasn't a rich person. $1 million to some people is nothing. For me, it was a lot. And I always think, gosh, if I'd done things differently, I probably shouldn't have done the movie. But then, as I mentioned, in retrospect, it's kind of worth $1 million.
Right.
And there's not a lot that I would go back and really redo, but I've got the most beautiful, going through that thought process with the movie led me to the most beautiful reason to not want to do anything over. I've got a 12-year-old son, Eli, who's just the most beautiful, perfect thing in the whole world. And whenever we have kids, I hope as a parent, we always, love our kids that much. And he's smart, he's talented, he's like everything I wanted to be in life on steroids at 12. And going back, and I thought, if I didn't have that if I didn't do the movie, because he was born after the movie, if I didn't do the movie, I wouldn't have Eli. If I changed one iota of things, the whole butterfly effect, I wouldn't have Eli. So I wouldn't change anything in the entire world going back. Maybe small things post Eli, because I got him already. But I wouldn't change even the slightest thing, not even what I ate for breakfast some morning, because any path that changes does not include Eli.
Yeah. Is there something that you've learned since doing the movie that you feel like, if I'd known that then, I would have been better at doing the movie? Or has it always been like you just reinforce that learning of like, I'm not good at making movies?
No, there's one thing that I wish I could, or I would love to take back if I didn't have Eli, right? Because it would have messed up Eli.
Right, sure. Right.
But one thing that I would take back, it's a learning that I think is the key to everything, is that creating a company, the most important thing you can do is that messaging. You need to learn about your competitors, learn what they do well, learn what they do poorly, and then articulate what you do differently and better than those folks you just learned about. And I think as a photographer, had I been able to articulate what made me different and better than my competitors, and not different and better at everything, but different and better for the people that I would work for or do business with, right? Mm-hmm. It would be meaningful for them. If I had understood that the way that I do now, I think I'd probably be 100 times richer and more successful financially and business-wise.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Last question for you. For our listeners, if somebody's out there thinking about launching a company like you did or launching a side hustle, what kind of advice would you have for them?
I would say just start it. Don't think about it too much. Just start it. We had one client that had a biotech company. And it was the client was doing these videos about people imparting nuggets of wisdom that they learned in their career, actual career moments of nuggets of wisdom. So this guy wasn't a direct client, but it was one of the most beautiful and important nuggets for an entrepreneur. He just sold a biotech company for $500 million. And he teaches at Harvard University, and his students would always ask him, how do you sell a biotech company for $500 million? And his answer was, well, luck is like getting hit by a freight train. It only happens if you're standing on the tracks. And if you want to sell a biotech company for $500 million, you have to start a biotech company.
Yeah.
And I think that's all it is. The advice is just start a company. Doesn't matter if it's an ice cream truck or if it's a biotech company or whatever.
Right.
Just start it.
Just started. I love it. David, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
You do any combination of bureau, small, and projects in any order whatsoever, and you'll be the first one to come up. And then just email me. There's an email address there, or fill out the form and say, hey, I saw you on Sanjay's podcast, and I'll give you a call right back.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more Side Hustle to Small Business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.